Section 62 of Gray's Anatomy, Part 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Laurie Ann Walden. Anatomy of the Human Body, Part 4, by Henry Gray. The Common Integument, Part 1. Integumentum commune, Skin. The integument covers the body and protects the deeper tissues from injury, from drying, and from invasion by foreign organisms. It contains the peripheral endings of many of the sensory nerves. It plays an important part in the regulation of the body temperature, and has also limited excretory and absorbing powers. It consists principally of a layer of vascular connective tissue named the corium or cutis vera, and an external covering of epithelium termed the epidermis or cuticle. On the surface of the former layer are sensitive and vascular papillae. Within or beneath it are certain organs with special functions, namely the sudoriferous and sebaceous glands and the hair follicles. The epidermis, cuticle, or scarf skin is non-vascular and consists of stratified epithelium, and is accurately molded on the papillary layer of the corium. It varies in thickness in different parts. In some situations, as in the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, it is thick, hard, and horny in texture. This may be in a measure due to the fact that these parts are exposed to intermittent pressure, but that this is not the only cause is proved by the fact that the condition exists to a very considerable extent at birth. The more superficial layers of cells, called the horny layer, stratum corneum, may be separated by maceration from a deeper stratum, which is called the stratum mucosum, and which consists of several layers of differently shaped cells. The free surface of the epidermis is marked by a network of linear furrows of variable size, dividing the surface into a number of polygonal or lozenge-shaped areas. Some of these furrows are large, as opposite the flexures of the joints, and correspond to the folds in the corium produced by movements. In other situations, as upon the back of the hand, they are exceedingly fine, and intersect one another at various angles. Upon the palmar surfaces of the hands and fingers, and upon the soles of the feet, the epidermal ridges are very distinct, and are disposed in curves. They depend upon the large size and peculiar arrangements of the papillae, upon which the epidermis is placed. The function of these ridges is primarily to increase resistance between contact surfaces for the purpose of preventing slipping, whether in walking or prehension. The direction of the ridges is at right angles with the force that tends to produce slipping, or to the resultant of such forces, when these forces vary in direction. Footnote: Professor Arthur Thomson of Oxford suggests that the contraction of these muscles on follicles which contain weak, flat hairs will tend to produce a permanent curve in the follicle, and this curve will be impressed on the hair which is molded within it, so that the hair, on emerging through the skin, will be curled. Curved hair follicles are characteristic of the scalp of the Bushman. End footnote. In each individual the lines on the tips of the fingers and thumbs form distinct patterns unlike those of any other person. A method of determining the identity of a criminal is based on this fact, impressions, fingerprints, of these lines being made on paper covered with soot, or on white paper after first covering the fingers with ink. The deep surface of the epidermis is accurately molded upon the papillary layer of the corium, the papillae being covered by a basement membrane, so that when the epidermis is removed by maceration, it presents on its undersurface a number of pits or depressions corresponding to the papillae, and ridges corresponding to the intervals between them. Fine tubular prolongations are continued from this layer into the ducts of the sudoriferous and sebaceous glands. The epidermis consists of stratified epithelium which is arranged in 4 layers from within outward as follows: A. Stratum mucosum, B. Stratum granulosum, C. Stratum lucidum, and D. Stratum corneum. The stratum mucosum, mucus layer, is composed of several layers of cells. Those of the deepest layer are columnar in shape, and placed perpendicularly on the surface of the basement membrane, to which they are attached by toothed extremities. This deepest layer is sometimes termed the stratum germinativum. The succeeding strata consist of cells of a more rounded or polyhedral form, the contents of which are soft, opaque, granular, and soluble in acetic acid. These are known as prickle cells, because of the bridges by which they are connected to one another. They contain fine fibrils which are continuous across the connecting processes with corresponding fibrils in adjacent cells. Between the bridges are fine intercellular clefts serving for the passage of lymph, and in these lymph corpuscles or pigment granules may be found. The stratum granulosum comprises 2 or 3 layers of flattened cells which contain granules of alidin, a substance readily stained by hematoxylin or carmine, and probably an intermediate substance in the formation of keratin. They are supposed to be cells in a transitional stage between the protoplasmic cells of the stratum mucosum and the horny cells of the superficial layers. The stratum lucidum appears in section as a homogeneous or dimly striated membrane, composed of closely packed cells in which traces of flattened nuclei may be found, and in which minute granules of a substance named keratohyalin are present. The stratum corneum, horny layer, consists of several layers of horny epithelial scales in which no nuclei are discernible, and which are unaffected by acetic acid, the protoplasm having become changed into horny material, or keratin. According to Ranvier, they contain granules of a material which has the characteristics of beeswax. The black color of the skin in the Negro, and the tawny color among some of the white races, is due to the presence of pigment in the cells of the epidermis. This pigment is more especially distinct in the cells of the stratum mucosum, and is similar to that found in the cells of the pigmentary layer of the retina. As the cells approach the surface and desiccate, the color becomes partially lost. The disappearance of the pigment from the superficial layers of the epidermis is, however, difficult to explain. The pigment, melanin, consists of dark brown or black granules of very small size, closely packed together within the cells, but not involving the nucleus. The main purpose served by the epidermis is that of protection; as the surface is worn away, new cells are supplied, and thus the true skin, the vessels and nerves which it contains, are defended from damage. The corium, cutis vera, dermis, or true skin, is tough, flexible, and highly elastic. It varies in thickness in different parts of the body. Thus it is very thick in the palms of the hand and soles of the feet, thicker on the posterior aspect of the body than on the front, and on the lateral than on the medial sides of the limbs. In eyelids, scrotum, and penis it is exceedingly thin and delicate. It consists of felted connective tissue with a varying amount of elastic fibers and numerous blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves. The connective tissue is arranged in 2 layers, a deeper or reticular, and a superficial or papillary. Unstriped muscular fibers are found in the superficial layers of the corium, wherever hairs are present, and in the subcutaneous areolar tissue of the scrotum, penis, labia majora, and nipples. In the nipples the fibers are disposed in bands, closely reticulated and arranged in superimposed laminae. The reticular layer, stratum reticulare, deep layer, consists of strong interlacing bands, composed chiefly of white fibrous tissue, but containing some fibers of yellow elastic tissue, which vary in number in different parts, and connective tissue corpuscles, which are often to be found flattened against the white fibrous tissue bundles. Toward the attached surface the fasciculi are large and coarse, and the areolae left by their interlacement are large, and occupied by adipose tissue and sweat glands. Below the reticular layer is the subcutaneous areolar tissue, which, except in a few situations, contains fat. The papillary layer, stratum papillare, superficial layer, corpus papillare of the corium, consists of numerous small, highly sensitive, and vascular eminences, the papillae, which rise perpendicularly from its surface. The papillae are minute conical eminences, having rounded or blunted extremities, occasionally divided into 2 or more parts, and are received into corresponding pits on the undersurface of the cuticle. On the general surface of the body, more especially in parts endowed with slight sensibility, they are few in number and exceedingly minute. But in some situations, as upon the palmar surfaces of the hands and fingers, and upon the plantar surfaces of the feet and toes, they are long, of large size, closely aggregated together, and arranged in parallel curved lines, forming the elevated ridges seen on the free surface of the epidermis. Each ridge contains 2 rows of papillae, between which the ducts of the sudoriferous glands pass outward to open on the summit of the ridge. Each papilla consists of very small and closely interlacing bundles of finely fibrillated tissue, with a few elastic fibers. Within this tissue is a capillary loop, and in some papillae, especially in the palms of the hands and the fingers, there are tactile corpuscles. Development. The epidermis and its appendages, consisting of the hairs, nails, sebaceous and sweat glands, are developed from the ectoderm, while the corium, or true skin, is of mesodermal origin. About the 5th week the epidermis consists of 2 layers of cells, the deeper one corresponding to the rete mucosum. The subcutaneous fat appears about the 4th month, and the papillae of the true skin about the 6th. A considerable desquamation of epidermis takes place during fetal life, and this desquamated epidermis, mixed with sebaceous secretion, constitutes the vernix caseosa with which the skin is smeared during the last 3 months of fetal life. The nails are formed at the 3rd month, and begin to project from the epidermis about the 6th. The hairs appear between the 3rd and 4th months, in the form of solid down growths of the deeper layer of the epidermis, the growing extremities of which become inverted by papillary projections from the corium. The central cells of the solid down growths undergo alteration to form the hair, while the peripheral cells are retained to form the lining cells of the hair follicle. About the 5th month the fetal hairs, lanugo, appear, first on the head and then on the other parts. They drop off after birth and give place to the permanent hairs. The cellular structures of the sudoriferous and sebaceous glands are formed from the ectoderm, while the connective tissue and blood vessels are derived from the mesoderm. All the sweat glands are fully formed at birth. They begin to develop as early as the 4th month. The arteries supplying the skin form a network in the subcutaneous tissue, and from this network branches are given off to supply the sudoriferous glands, the hair follicles, and the fat. Other branches unite in a plexus immediately beneath the corium. From this plexus fine capillary vessels pass into the papillae, forming, in the smaller ones, a single capillary loop, but in the larger, a more or less convoluted vessel. The lymphatic vessels of the skin form 2 networks, superficial and deep, which communicate with each other and with those of the subcutaneous tissue by oblique branches. The nerves of the skin terminate partly in the epidermis and partly in the corium. Their different modes of ending are described on pages 1059 to 1061. End of section 62.